We are live.
All right. Welcome to the 48-hour Artcheck 194.
Jeez.
It's insane. I love having that intro. Cool. Good to see you guys.
2 to 3 weeks we hit 200 then, huh?
Yeah, we're getting there. We gotta think about something we can do for 200.
200 will live stream me taking a nap.
That sounds like a plan. Maybe 200 is just literally like live streams of everyone sleeping.
That'd be funny. Yeah. Well, I'm back. I was back at work.
I love it.
I'm not sick anymore. Well, I'm not sick enough to be at home anymore. So, yeah. Good times.
Starting to feel a little more recuperated, though, from it, or still kind of some lagging symptoms?
Yeah. Recuperated is different, but symptoms are going away. I'm still kind of tired, but yeah. So
yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, let's get into it. I am glad you're able to leave the house, though. That's got to be a little bit refreshing.
Yeah, it's nice to get out. So we were trapped for a while, and now we're not, and it's good. So
sweet. All right. Well, let's get into it. So, what all did you guys get accomplished since our last Artcheck?
I can go first. Not a ton, but I have most of this roughed out. I've still got to work on kind of like the splatter and maybe some of the timing, but yeah, that'll be pretty close to getting done. Also wrapped a client project, got paid and finished that up, and I think that's it. Yeah. So mainly that.
Nice.
Thanks.
It's looking good.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. I individually rigged the ribs or the spines on the, I don't know, his dorsal fin, I guess you'd call that. So I can like fan those out and everything. Anyway, it's probably too much effort for such a short thing, but it'll be fun. It'll be fun to play with it. So
I love it. Sweet. So Scott, what all did you get done since our last Artcheck?
So I launched I just disappeared. Okay. I launched my first episode of Making Comics 101, did a premiere for that, and it went pretty well, I think. Got a lot of positive feedback and everything. So I'm anxious, to keep the ball rolling on that. So, but I kind of took a break from videos. I created some of that stuff in advance. I think this weekend is going to be, or at least this week leading up to the weekend will probably be me working on videos. But I found that I was spending so much time with videos that I wasn't doing other stuff. So in an effort to hopefully stay self-employed, I've been looking into other avenues and to sell my art and everything like that. So I've been looking into things like Amazon Merch and Amazon KDP, which is the Kindle publishing platform, and stuff like that. So just doing a lot of research on that stuff. And I've kind of found, most of the people I'm watching, I'm learning from, they're more entrepreneurial types, not necessarily designers, but like, for instance, in that KDP space, it's like they're just publishing all this stuff. And, to be quite frank, it's all pretty much garbage. It looks like garbage. So I'm like I don't see why I can't compete in that space. I mean, of course you have to have that, you have to do what they're doing, which is and some of it's not even necessarily marketing, but it's, unless you count like it's like a lot of SEO and stuff like that, and writing the right descriptions and all that. So I've been doing that. I've been working on creating products and things like that. I haven't launched any yet or loaded any yet. Like, I did sign up for the Amazon merch platform. And there's like a waiting list, and it's kind of weird because there's like tiers, because there's so many people trying to jump into it, that you start off on like a 10 tier, and you can only upload 10 designs, which I've got tons of designs, but I got to kind of figure out which ones I think might sell, because you can't move out of that tier until you sell 10 designs. And so I guess people have told the strategy is to, basically at first price it super low, so there's not even a profit. And then if you can sell those and get out of that 10 tier, then you go to the 25 tier where you have to sell 25 designs. And once you get out of that, I think the next one up is the 100 tier. And then from then, hopefully you can start building stuff. But I haven't even got approved yet. So I don't know how long that'll take. I've heard some people it takes months. But I've got, you kind of apply and you put like a little application and you tell some other stuff. So I showed my website and a bunch of other places where I sell stuff. So I think they can see I'm serious. So we'll see what happens with that. As far as the Kindle publishing part, that you don't really have to wait on. So I'm working on some stuff for there, and I don't want to show it quite yet. I may mention it later on when I'm further along. The other thing about those platforms is it's super, like, no one really shares anything. And usually I'm like an open book I'm trying to be very transparent, but the amount of like copycats, I mean, anytime you have an idea or whatever, if it's successful, people steal it, So it's like, I have a little bit, I think, again, because I'm a designer and an illustrator, I think I have a leg up because, a lot of people's strategy is to go in and find something that's selling that doesn't look that great and try to improve on it. But even, like I said, even these people I'm watching that say they're improving on it, they're basically hiring like Fiverr designers or trying to do it themselves, and it's just not good. So hopefully, even if people do try to copy it, hopefully they won't be able to do it as well. Not that there's not a lot of great artists out there that could, but I don't know if there's as many artists. Artists typically don't want to do all the entrepreneurial stuff. So I'll see what happens, but that's kind of what I've been knee deep in right now. So I know it's kind of a longer intro, but I'm just working on a lot of stuff. So that's what I've been working on.
Got it. That sounds fascinating. That's kind of cool. So the merch account then, is that kind of like a print on demand, but through Amazon?
But you've got the whole marketplace of Amazon, plus if you're Prime, you get free shipping and everything. So it tends to sell. It's just, like I said, it's just in the merch there's some good designs out there, and I think the cream probably crawls to the top, but rises to the top. But I think a lot of people's strategy, the entrepreneur people, is just they're dumping like hundreds of products a day. I don't even know how you do that. Honestly, I don't know how you upload 100. Some people are talking about unloading 200 T-shirt designs a day. I don't know how you even. I don't see how you do that. But it's just a numbers game for them. It's kind of like spamming emails. I mean, if you send out 1 million emails, you're bound to get something. So that's kind of most of these guys' strategy. But I'm hopefully the strategy of get some good niches and stuff. And that's the other thing is some of the products that I'm building right now, will probably be branded under me because they're comic related and everything. But then after that, you can publish under, you can only have one account, which is fine, but you can also publish under different names. So if I want to go under a niche, like for instance, some kind of golf, that's broad, but if you want to niche down and like whatever, like hippie golf, or I don't know, combine a couple different niches or something, you can do that under a different name and just put that so it doesn't, because I've got tons of ideas for all of these different things, but I don't want to put them under my brand because they're not my brand.
Got it.
If I can kind of do that and do my own brand and then do some other stuff that might be profitable, because at this point it's like anything I can do to hopefully not have to go back and work for work for somebody else. So we'll see what happens. So, obviously this is if it works, it's gonna take a while for it to build up, but I'm kind of starting off now, so we'll see what happens.
I like it. That's awesome. Cool. So what I have gotten done since last time, let me show it. I'm starting to do the type pencils, and I think my memory card is like glitching out because I'm seeing little red spots all over my screen. So hopefully that does not translate over to you guys, but let me try it. So that's where I'm at. Like here, I'll zoom out a little bit. So I basically got the author page pretty much finished. Rough pencils. I'm going to go in, tighten a little bit of it with my whole method of like blue lines, and then hitting it with like a passive magenta, and then I should be, after this, I'm pretty much at the stage where I can format the interiors, and that's pretty exciting. So there's still some extra pages I'm going to have to include, like the legal stuff that's on the back of the inside cover on the front, where it says like, not supposed to represent actual people or whatever, which is always funny because you technically have to put that in an auto bio, even though it's like totally representing people. Yeah. But even in auto bio, you still have to put that disclaimer so you don't get sued. And then let's see. So I'm just kind of making headway slowly but surely, but getting closer and closer. And then I'm going to have to look into a lot of stuff you're looking into, Scott. So you got a head start.
Yeah. Well, if you need any advice, let me know.
Yeah. I probably will be calling a lot of you guys for advice, especially when it comes to the blurb for the back and getting quotes and, I don't know, figuring out the order to do it in. Like I said, though, I really want to just have it pretty much as finished as I possibly can before any of that stuff. So yeah, I can't wait to see the Making Comics 101 video, though. I'm going to watch it tonight when we're done.
Yeah, definitely let me know. Leave a comment. Let me know.
Will do, man. And congrats on getting that up. Like, that's been a long effort.
Yeah, I've been working on it for a while. So.
All right, so I'll go ahead and pull this from there, and then we can talk about challenges. So why don't we start with you, Corey? I think you have the most interesting challenge, probably.
Probably the least interesting. Just getting plowed in by my city multiple times in the last couple days. It has dumped, I don't even know how many inches of snow over the last 72 hours, but so much so that they have plowed the roads twice. I got my Honda Pilot, which is an SUV, stuck pulling out of my driveway. And each time that's at least an hour, if not more, of shoveling and plowing to like be able to get out of my house. So there's that. I should have taken some video. It's pretty interesting, but like the pile of snow on my lawn next to my driveway now is about 4 feet high, maybe 5 feet high. It's close to overhead. So it's a lot of snow. Yeah. And then, just really tired coming off of this flu thing. So that's pretty much it. Nothing too serious. Just, just making, I don't know. I'm super glad I made a purchase to buy a snowblower a couple years ago because it's paid off in spades just this last weekend. So takes about an hour to do what would take me probably like 3 or 4 hours if I were to do it by hand. So it's good investment.
Yeah, I think if you're in an area where there's a ton, like it snows frequently, it seems like it would behoove you to invest in stuff like that because snow is not fun after a while.
Yeah, it's in places where you never get snow, it's novel for a couple days, but it's
I liked the snow we got for about a day, and then second day I was like, okay, this can go now.
Yeah. So
Not a
just
fan.
imagine,
We had our snowball fight.
imagine that, but it just sticks around for like 5 months.
Yeah.
And every couple weeks, you just get like another 6 to 8 inches just dumped on top of it, and it just stays.
Oh, man. I also instantly think of like what that's like when it runs off after it's been there for that long.
Yeah, I mean that's our agricultural community is based on that. So the runoff is what waters all the farms. So without the frozen precipitation, the entire economy over here would collapse, and probably there'd be a huge shortage of hops for alcohol and potatoes and
That's a
all
shame.
kinds of stuff. So yeah, but Budweiser would be hurting for a little bit if Idaho stopped snowing. So
Well, that's not so bad. But the hops and the beer thing, other than Budweiser, I'm such a beer snob. I'm like, I can't do Budweiser. Okay. Yeah, that's quite a challenge though, man. Being snowed in. Glad you're kind of over the other challenge though, and on the up and up. That's good news.
yeah, doing pretty good. So
yeah. Scott, what about you? Challenges?
My main challenge is just learning all this new stuff, trying to, it's just a lot of education. So trying to figure out what works and what doesn't, and just watching all these different videos and working on layouts for things and trying to get everything to work right, trying to export stuff. And I don't know, I've been doing this thing where every time I export as a PDF, it takes my 300 DPI file, and it takes it down to 72. The pixel's the same, but it takes it down to 72 DPI. So when I go to paste in InDesign, it's like this giant thing that's like, and I don't know how to, maybe you guys know how to fix that. So I have to basically save it as export it as a PDF or a JPEG, then open it back in, change the resolution to 300, and then save it again for every single file. And these are, I'm working on books, so there's multiple pages that I got to do this, different things like that,
In InDesign?
No, well, when I paste these, because I'm creating the pages in first, starting in Illustrator, then Photoshop, and saving them as JPEGs or PSDs or PNGs. Mm-hmm. And then importing them into InDesign, which from there I've got to export as a PDF.
You should be able to just skip the step of exporting them as a PNG and just import, place, instead of importing them, place the raw AI file.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is it's not totally a raw AI file, all of it. Some of it is. Some of it has raster. Like I'll create some of it in I guess the skeleton or whatever in Illustrator, and then if I have to add color or add photographs or whatever, I do that in Photoshop. So it's all.
Yeah, but even the AI or the PSD.
Yeah, PSD will work too.
Just place that into InDesign, and you'll skip that step, and then InDesign will deal with exporting it correctly.
Okay.
Yeah, and the same thing with, like, if it's an Illustrator file and you're using like, photo or raster images in it, just make sure they're embedded, and then you're good. Like it should read fine.
Right.
So Photoshop, it's automatically embedded. So
okay. Yeah.
But I was like, the PNG thing, I'm like, I don't think you have to take that step. So that might save you some work.
Well, also some of it's stuff that I've learned from videos. That this is the technique that they, I found one artist that actually does good work that's actually doing it. So besides just entrepreneur guys, and I'm kind of following his technique. So, so I don't know. Yeah, but just stuff like that. Those are the challenges.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious. Now I'm curious.
I can show you after the show what I'm doing, and you can, I'll show you what I'm doing after the show.
Yeah, I mean, unless which you don't, unless you have a dinosaur of a computer, InDesign is, it's built to handle. I could see doing that. Like I used to have to do stuff like that because I was working on like a 2012 Mac Mini.
Right.
But like you shouldn't have to have to go through those hoops, because basically you're doing that to save processor power, but I think you should be able to just go raw native files straight into InDesign. It'll save you that step. Did you do that and it didn't work, or?
Well, the other thing is, I'm building these templates. The Photoshop templates have tons and tons and tons of layers, but because I've got all the different pages in like one Photoshop file, so I'm exporting each layer as a page.
That makes sense.
That
makes sense.
Yeah,
that makes a little more sense.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, sorry, there's a lot of in the process, so it's hard to like lay it all out. So
no worries. We weren't asking for like all the that is challenging though. Cool. Any other challenges or main
that's the bulk of it that I can think of.
Okay. Mine is just I'm exhausted. I'm like I'm beat. I have been being a little more involved in like this local campaign for Congress, because there's a guy running for Congress that I really like, and so that's been busy. That's part of why I missed the Artcheck, or not Artcheck, the Artcasters last week too, because I went to a local Democratic debate, which was really fun and cool. But aside from that, just working on art and family stuff, and then workplace, just some really big challenges that are good and represent growth and stuff, because it's like we're very busy at a time where we're not usually as busy, and that's a good sign, but it can get really taxing after a while. So I'm just basically getting home very beat, very exhausted. You guys are pretty familiar. I have a really long commute, and so by the time I get home, it's usually like 6:30. So, and I leave work at like 5. So if I stay till like 6, then I usually don't get home till like 7:30 or 8. And it's like it's just little things. It's not like massive amounts of stuff, but it's just very exhausting and hard to kind of keep energy. On top of, like a 7-year-old, a 6-year-old, but like running around and being silly, and all the craziness that comes along with that too, because you've got to kind of, as the dad, you have to run around and be silly as well. And so it's just like I'm like, my energy is just basically tapped. So that's my biggest challenge, is just like trying to stay positive, stay motivated, and stay awake. Because I'm like exhausted. At this point, it feels like if I slept for like 2 days, I'd still be tired.
Yeah.
And so we all have those times, but it's just been extra challenging the last few days. So, yeah.
See, I'm the dad that's just like, I'm going to lay on the ground near the toys you're playing with and hope you don't whack me in the eye with one of them when I accidentally fall asleep. That's where I'm at.
I understand that one.
So, of course, I have an 18-month-old, which is a little bit different than a 6-year-old. But.
Yeah, that will pretty much make you get knocked out.
Yeah. So. Anyway, well, fun. Good stuff. How about plans? I don't know. I can't remember. I'm gonna finish this guy. I don't like the splat effect yet. It's not really doing it the way that I want it to. It doesn't look good at all. Mainly that's a placeholder that I have in there because I was trying to make sure that I could get the vector in there. There's like a little bit of experimenting I was doing with the drip. So after it splats, a couple of those kind of like drip. And so now that I know that I can do that, I'm going to do it well. So I'm going to go redo all that, and then probably get some masking in for like when the bug hits the wall, and then leave some kind of twitching bug parts in the splat, like with like legs and stuff like that. There's kind of like twitch while you're looking at the logo. So And then put it together. I've been using Agora Pulse a little bit to kind of look at my analytics and stuff. And so the best time for my audience for me to post is the worst time for me, which is between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. And the worst time to post for me, there's this whole thing where they analyze my entire channel. The worst time for me is when I typically post, which is like between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m.
Huh.
So, I've got to go in there and plan a little bit better and be a little more strategic. And anyway,
I've never looked into that, like best time to post, but I'm posting around, for me, I'm posting around kind of what you're saying is the prime time for you.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's across the board or how that works.
I don't think it's across the board based on the way Instagram's current algorithm runs. It's very individual. And so it's not like it used to be, but I'm getting like 30% of the people seeing my stuff are from hashtags. And so I just get a better response from the 30% that's pre 9 a.m. than the 30% that's up past midnight. And so I tend to get everything that I post. I'm in the last couple months has gained a handful of followers, and you can tell it's pretty cool. I should log in and show you guys, but you can tell like which hashtags are converting to engagement better than others, and which ones are converting to followers, and which followers are sticking around and not doing the follow thing and all that. So I'm just trying to be a little bit more strategic. And then I've been playing with the idea of a video because I just finished reading several books on this subject, but I noticed that the way that I'm dealing with my imposter syndrome today compared to 2 years ago is significantly different, and there's science to back up the way that I'm doing it. And so I thought that might be an interesting video to do, kind of a discussion about imposter syndrome and mindfulness meditation, and using mindfulness, which is a specific technique to kind of combat negative self-talk, which has been helpful. So I still think I'm faking it and that everybody's better than I am, but I don't value those thoughts as much as I used to. So they're still there. They just don't have as much power or credence. So yeah. Anyway, so I'll probably work on a script. I don't know if I'll finish it by Wednesday, but I'll get that animation done and then get started on that video, I think. So
that's awesome. That's a good topic too.
Yeah.
It's interesting. My form of mindfulness to avoid imposter syndrome is just being so absolutely busy that I have absolutely no time to focus on imposter syndrome. I'm just trying to kind of stay afloat, but that can be, that can be negative in its own right too. So
yeah, getting an equal amount of rejections and awards for something that you made is helpful as well.
Yeah,
because I'm split right down the middle, and so it's hard to see numbers that combat your thoughts and ignore the numbers. So yeah, about half the people that see the stuff that I make like it. So it's hard to say that you suck when you have metrics that say that you don't. So
yeah, and even in that, there's a little bit of your imposter syndrome rearing its head, because somebody turned it down doesn't necessarily mean they disliked it either.
Right.
You might have just been up against, a Werner Herzog film or something.
Right. Or it doesn't fit their thing or whatever. Yeah, I get it. I've had all these conversations with myself. I know.
I love it. All right. So plans.
Scott.
Did you cover it, Scott?
Yeah, for me, just the same thing. I'm gonna keep working on this. Hopefully, I'll I'm hoping tomorrow I'll be able to upload some of these books that I'm working on. I'm kind of working on like 6 of them. They're kind of a series, so I'm working on 6 of them together. And hopefully I'll get a chance to upload those. And I don't know how long the upload process. I've watched videos and stuff on it, but I'm sure there's a bunch of other stuff that's going to take longer. But I'm making some progress. So that I'm going to keep, kind of working on that. And then once I get those done, I'll probably have to squeeze in. I've got to film a video for Friday because I'm doing these quick tip videos. But that probably won't take that long because they're quick videos. And then what's tomorrow? Tuesday. So Wednesday I'll have another episode. I'll have it's going to be on tools for comics, sort of one of the bonus episodes. So I'll have that up. So I'm trying to do a schedule of three of these videos a week.
That might have the added benefit of when you get the nefarious tools question, you can just forward people to that video.
Yeah. I could mention tools on every single video, and people still ask what tools you use. So,
yeah. Oh
well,
man.
It's a comment. It's helping. It's helping the algorithm.
Yeah.
So
maybe it'll do really well because everyone wants to know tools. So
that's true. To be honest, I get it though, because I think, particularly when I was like a couple of years in. Now I love hearing about people's tools, but less so than I think I did when I was like, a couple years in and just getting in the groove and being like, what do you use to like, because you really want to know, like what gets that effect. And honestly, like, I don't know, there was a question, I think Corey threw up about like what crow quills people use.
That was Mike Emirates.
Oh, okay. It was Mike. But that was a fascinating one because I was like, that's a question I want to know, because I'm like, I haven't delved in crow quills a lot. I've tried like 3 different types. Yeah. And so like I was reading the comments that Mike had on Facebook for that because it was just fascinating. So I get it. Tools are good. That'll be good. Cool. I'm looking forward to the series. I can't wait to watch it tonight too. Cool. Let's. My plans.
Your plans.
Yeah. So I would like to have. Let me share this again. If I can throw this on there. So I'd like to have like the tight pencils done. I'm not sure how much I need the tight pencils as I'm doing them now. I'm kind of wondering if I should just take it and go to finish. So I might actually just try to have inking started on it. Yeah. So
cool.
That's where I'll be at. Yeah. All right. Topics. Was anybody on a specific topic? I think Scott, you had mentioned one.
I had thrown one out. I don't know if it's one that's just, it would probably go forever or what. It's what we touched on last time. I don't know if that's something you guys want to talk about, or is that the copyright trademark thing? I mean, that thing could be a whole YouTube channel unto itself. But
I mean, we could hit some high level points.
Yeah.
I think before we get into any of the points, I do want to preface that topic by saying none of us are lawyers.
Right. Yeah.
So like our understanding of copyright and trademark is always has to be hedged by that. Like if you want to look into copyright and trademark law, I'd recommend it. If you have any questions, but we can talk about it from our experiences and our small knowledge of it. Yeah. So, okay.
I'll just put this at the bottom of the screen. There we go.
Thank you. I like it. Because I don't want somebody to like take what we say here and like
get. Is that how you spell lawyers? Not that I'm a great speller, but
there's probably a Y in there.
Yeah,
I'm also not a speller.
I'm not either.
Yeah, I'll fix that in a minute. There's a couple comments I wanted to just point out. Kayla's saying that would be an awesome topic. I keep forgetting the term imposter syndrome exists, and it's nice to be reminded of it because it makes it sound far more common. It is super common. I was actually teaching a lesson about teaching recently. We were going over there's like a number of different types of questions that you can ask to formulate like different responses from your class. And I just mentioned imposter syndrome as something that I deal with, because the idea is when you ask a question, if anybody's ever teaching, and you ask a question, your immediate response to the silence of people thinking about what they're going to say to answer is going to be immediate self-doubt. Like you're immediately going to be like, I'm a horrible teacher. That was a terrible question. Everybody's looking at me weird. When really your entire audience is going, oh, let's see. Let me think about that question for a minute. They're not thinking about you at all. They're thinking about if they want to answer, and if they were answering, what would they say? But during that silence, you start beating yourself up. Anyway, as soon as I mentioned imposter syndrome, everyone in the class started writing furiously. Like it was like way more interesting than the actual topic I was talking about. And so I said, I'm just curious why you guys are writing this. They're like, I'd never heard of that. And I think I haven't. It's like, yeah, most creatives do. And then Frank was saying that you have an award nominated short film. No Imposter can do that. So I don't know if No Imposter can do that, but yeah. So I won a couple. It's been fun. And then imposter syndrome would be a great topic maybe for the next Artcheck, if not today.
I'm frankly a little more interested in that than the trademark. You guys want to just do imposter syndrome?
Sure.
We could do that. Yeah.
I mean, unless you guys were revved about the trademark thing.
We can always.
To me, I got bored the second I mentioned lawyers.
Yeah. Even though we did put the little ticker thing on there, but
I took it down. That's good. All right, so we can do that. Today's topic is imposter syndrome. So just to catch everybody up who doesn't have any idea what I'm talking about, imposter syndrome's a thing that most creatives deal with. And the basic idea of it is that you do not naturally internalize your successes, but you do internalize your failures. And what that looks like is that you, in your self-talk, feel like you are faking it and that everyone else knows what's going on. And so you feel like you're the one in the room that's about to be found out as a fraud because you don't know everything and your brain uses that to beat you up. And so that's kind of how that works. The whole successes and failures thing, if this sounds familiar to anybody, you probably are dealing with some level of imposter syndrome, like I am, is when something goes well or you have a success, you figure out a way that you, like a logical path that you can use to not attribute that to your effort. For example, it was just a confluence of events. Anybody in my position would have had the same result, or just kind of happenstance that happened. It was just kind of an accident. But then if something goes wrong, no matter how it goes wrong, you don't do the same thing. You don't say, oh, that could happen to anybody. You say, yep, absolutely, I deserve that. That's what I expected. That is that should happen because I deserve that failure. I earned it. So you earn your failures and you kind of slough off your successes. And it's really an interesting concept because when I first came up against the concept, it rung really true with me. And it's especially difficult if you are actually experiencing legitimate struggle, and more difficult to define achievement or progress. But you can still have imposter syndrome, even if you're just starting out or whatever. But I mean, if you've ever gotten a client and then told yourself, oh, I only got that client because I'm cheap, or they don't know anybody else, or whatever, you're rationalizing away a success that you've had. You got that client because you can do something that they need done. And and you were able to behave in such a way that they knew that you did that thing. There's no other way that happened. But inside of your brain, you can kind of rationalize that away. And that's what imposter syndrome is. It's super interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I think that's fascinating. I mean, it's always been an interesting topic to me because I remember my first time teaching, walking in front of a classroom and just having this thought just course through my head the entire class where I was like, I shouldn't be teaching. And it's like, I had gone to college to get an MFA, which is what everyone who taught me had. Right. And I had, over a decade of experience doing illustration and graphic design professionally.
Yep.
And worked for big clients and stuff. But I just felt like a fake. Like the whole time I was like, this is a fake thing. They're going to figure it out. The kids are going to figure out, like, they're going to figure out that, like, when I worked for Merrill Lynch, like, that wasn't like, that was me pulling the wool over their eye. Like it's fluke. Like this. Yeah. And it's like the whole thing was a fluke. But the thing is, and that's the bizarre thing about imposter syndrome is like, it's totally irrational.
Yeah.
That college wouldn't have let me in front of that classroom. Right. If I wasn't, experienced enough to like get through the whole interview process and stuff like that, and like have a portfolio and a significant amount of clients. Like,
you beat out other qualified candidates for the job.
100%. Same thing happened when I first started doing freelance. I was like, I'm not qualified. And it's like, I had spent my entire life learning how to draw and doing art, but the first time I was doing it professionally, I felt like they're going to figure out I'm not Daniel Klaus. And so like, they're going to figure that out and then go hire Daniel Klaus, like that kind of thing. And then like it continually happens all the time. Happened when I was an art director too. Like when I was first interviewing as an art director, but one weird thing that does dual like kind of fight imposter syndrome are those brief moments of clarity. And luckily I have them. I know I have friends who don't as often, but like I do remember when I was interviewing for an art director position, it's one of the first times in my life where I didn't I felt like an imposter up until I was being interviewed and having to walk through my experience. And then I was like, oh, it's like midway through the interview where I was like, oh, I should actually get this job. Like actually I'd be a really great candidate for this. It's just, and it wasn't like I convinced myself. It was just like, I just have racked up a lot of, but once again, my imposter syndrome will then even justify that by being like, well, I had just lucked out to have done it long enough to where there's qualification,
Yeah. And the
fascinating thing.
The interesting thing about it, and the thing that is hard, is that that voice, that critical voice, isn't lying. It's just exaggerating parts of the truth and ignoring other parts of the truth. Yeah. It's not an honest voice, but it's not an outright lie, because the fact of the matter is any success that you have has some measure of randomness or luck to it.
Yeah. 100%.
Right? And any failure that you have has some measure of fault, or something along those lines. And so, but that's some measure. That's not 100%. And that's where the dishonesty comes in. Is it doesn't matter whether or not you landed that client because you happen to be eating a sandwich at the same place that the other guy was eating a sandwich and struck up a conversation, because the fact of the matter is that you can back it up. You're able to deliver. You're not actually a fraud. Yeah. So yes, there might have been some luck in the confluence of events that brought you into, a position where you were able to be successful. But that doesn't negate the fact that you've spent hundreds or thousands of hours over the course of years, getting to the point where you can do what you can do because you can do that and you've put that work in. That's legit.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine Allen Ginsberg being like, yeah, my poetry's okay, but it's, the only reason people know me is my buddy Jack. It's like
right.
This guy Jack Kerouac, he's the writer. I just lucked out. Like it's absurd to think that just because, I mean, that's not going to hurt to have like a friend who's a successful writer and you're a good writer too, and therefore that person and through that get known as well.
Yeah,
there's luck to that, but like, I don't think a lot of people make that claim like, oh, that's just because they're friends or whatever,
Well, and people who do make that claim, that's something that they've got to deal with. That doesn't actually have anything to do with reality. That's them and their sour grapes and their rationalization for things. Kayla has a good comment. She says, I recently sat down in a room of other designers, and I've spent like the last 4 days convincing myself that I'm the worst designer in that room. Imposter syndrome is the worst. And there's this idea with imposter syndrome that you are in constant comparison to everyone else. And it's interesting because I've heard it said this way, that we typically compare our blooper reel to everybody else's demo reel. The idea is that I know all of my flaws because they're mine and I live with them and I see them all the time.
Yeah.
But I don't really know any of Scott's flaws. I just see the work that Scott produces and it looks amazing. And so it's an unfair comparison to be inside of my head and compare myself to Scott.
Yeah.
And that's true. That's true of anything. Is I can look at my worst qualities and my biggest glaring gaps that I have in my skill set and compare that to other people who do those things really well. I don't know what the point of doing that is, but that's kind of what your brain does. And even if that isn't the case, sometimes just being in the room with other people who do something similar to what you do, for some reason we just assume we're like, oh, they must be better than me, and they know I don't know how to X, or how to Y or whatever. And it's like, one, you might not even have seen in each other's work, so they don't know anything about your work, and you don't know anything about their work. They could be terrible, which it doesn't matter because it's not a game of comparison. And so I often will remind myself that the marketplace is not a zero-sum game. It's not. Zero-sum games mean if somebody gets a job, that's one less job for everybody else. That's not how it works. Like if you get a job and you do it well, you'll actually create jobs for other people. And so because you got that job, there's going to be more work and more jobs out there for other people. And so your creation has created, it's spawned, it's bred. And so trying to look at everything as like, I won, he lost, I lost, he won, or whatever, is a really narrow-minded and short-sighted way of looking at the market. And so it's not a direct comparison. It's not like there's 5 starting spots on the team and you either get one or you don't. That's not how it works.
Yeah, and I feel like the one thing that's kind of a shame about our society sometimes is I think, and you'll see this in business a lot, like they even have a game called the lifeboat game, where it's like the lifeboat strategy, or the elevator pitch, these things that are like, you have this limited window of time to prove your worth. Your value is going to be determined by this, and if you don't get it, you're going to sink.
It's like the people that lose on a reality TV cooking show or something. It's like they're gonna go home and keep cooking. A lot of them are going to start businesses based on the notoriety that they gained, and they technically lost, and they're not on the show anymore or whatever.
Yeah.
But as viewers, we see that and we're like, we're never going to see Susie again. Susie doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
She's gone.
And if it's like the British baking show, you're like, they're so polite about it though. I mean, like that's one thing that bothers me is this idea. And I think there's a semblance of truth to it, but I think like the danger of like a lifeboat strategy is the idea that like we can't kind of grow the boat. The boat doesn't have any other resources, and it's literally like there's only 3 people who's the most valuable. You're not valuable, get off the boat. And it's like, first off, like, it creates a negative vibe for the people vying for the spot on the boat. And then it also creates a terrible culture of negativity for the people on the boat. So to me, I feel like if you look at life as like a big lifeboat strategy where you need to be the person on the boat because otherwise you're going to get thrown off and sink, like, it's a terrible way to live.
Yeah.
It's a terrible way to live. It's going to create anxiety. If not anxiety, it's going to create massive narcissism, which is like it's almost like a polar opposite of imposter syndrome, because I think creatives suffer from one or the other. It's like, and both are kind of generated from a little too much self-thinking, you know?
Yeah.
But it's like, but if you think about it, it's like imposter syndrome is telling you're nothing. It's all fake. It's like, you know, the criticisms are true and the compliments are just happy accidents. But then narcissism's like the reverse, where it's like the criticisms are completely nonsense and I'm great, I'm amazing, I'm incredible. And both like kind of can have dire consequences because neither are a picture of reality. They're two poles.
I'm gonna cross stitch this on a pillow, but one of my favorite quotes is from Chris Oatley. And on a podcast that he did one time, he said, "You are never as good or as bad as you think you are."
Yeah.
I just think it's so true, because our view of ourselves is just massively distorted. You know,
Yeah.
If you think that you have no room to grow and that you're amazing and that whatever, and I have this conversation with students where I'm like, you know, you need to understand that you're going to spend your entire life getting better because you're not there yet. And that's your whole life. And if you think you're there, you should try a different career because you're not going to do well.
Yeah.
Right. But then you also need to understand that you're going to spend your entire career getting better because you're not there yet. And if you think you're never going to get there, you need to look at the fact that no one gets there. There's no there. There's no bar to pass. You know, there's no certification where one day somebody says, you are an X now. It's just, you get to a certain level and then
welcome to illustration land.
Right. Here's
here are where all the good jobs are.
Yeah, you're gonna land some work, and then then you'll start landing better work, and then you'll land better work, and then it goes from there, And I also don't want people to run the risk of validating their work by their art, by the money that they make, because that's a dangerous road to go down. Because then you're going to be like those guys that Scott isn't going to be, which they're like, I'm going to put 100 designs out a day, and I don't care what it is. I'm just going to game the system. It's all going to, it's like you're not making anything worthwhile. Like Scott's going to do well in that situation because Scott's going to create quality work. But the guys that are out there just putting out 100, 200 designs a day, they're just that's a quantity game,
Yeah, I'm wondering if they maybe are somehow either oblivious or not concerned with the imposter syndrome, because here they're basically going into a market that should be, the artwork should be like the main thing, and they're not like, well, I'm not an artist, I can't do this. And a lot of them are upfront with it. They say, well, I'm not a designer, but that doesn't stop them. So, in some ways, and they're making money.
Yeah.
So, in some ways it's kind of like, maybe not, if you can brush aside that imposter syndrome. I guess that's what we're talking about. You shouldn't let that kind of stuff hold you back,
Yeah. And I think that the thing that's really important to remember is like there's a positive negative voice. And that usually has solutions attached to it. So it's like, if you're beating yourself up because you draw hands funny or something, there's actually a solution to that. And if you're like, if it actually leads you to the solution of practicing drawing hands until you draw them better, studying maybe like the bones in the hand, right? And like the rotation of like the arm and which bone attaches to like this side of the wrist and which bone attaches to this side and how they rotate, right? And all that fun stuff. Then you start drawing hands better. And so that negative becomes a positive. That's the kind of negative thinking that can be really good. But the negative thinking of imposter syndrome is like this whole other world, because that's the part that like you could even master the hand and you'd still be like, I just can't draw hands. And it's like, to the rest of the world, like you can, and you're just like you're being insane,
Yeah.
But there's a balance, right? Like, you need to have confidence to do art. And that's one of the tough parts about art, is like most people who do art have confidence issues, right?
Yeah.
I think to get good at art, you have to be able to critique yourself. And I think it's a natural place to be in, to beat yourself up. Because if you never think that could be better, that thing I made could be better, you're never going to get better. And so those that get better are those that deal with those thoughts of self-critique.
Yeah.
And so you've got to figure out a way. So Frank's asking the question, what's the best prescription for imposter syndrome?
I got a tip. One I'd think of immediately is just objectivity, which is really hard and doesn't come natural to people. But like trying to learn better objective viewpoints of yourself, it's honestly one of the most valuable things in life to kind of gain. Whenever, like in management, it's like one thing that I've found constantly that people are looking for in art directors and leads and senior artists and stuff like that is the ability to objectively critique yourself. Like to be able to step outside yourself and go, yeah, like for me, like a weakness I have is I interrupt people. I'm aware of that weakness. Like if I weren't aware of that weakness, I think that would make me a pretty bad leader, because then if somebody like gets bothered by me interrupting and I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, it's like, no. I know that's a character flaw I have. So I can actually accept that when I hear it from people, because I'm like, yeah, I do actually do that,
I do that too.
Yeah. So, yeah. So like to be able to objectively view things, but not in like a way that goes down the path of like just beating yourself up, because it doesn't do anything, right? It doesn't do anything good. But just being able to like objectively step back, and that goes beyond yourself too. Like, in leadership and art, it's also good to be able to objectively view other people. Like one of the first things times you're going to experience imposter syndrome, like 10,000-fold, is when you're sending out query letters. When you're a young designer, or a seasoned designer, and like the work dries up and you have to send out those queries and hunt for clients. Like that is a test of your own willpower. It's, there's all these statistics on rates of depression when people are out of a job and seeking a job. And there's actually an endurance to it. So usually people within the first 2 weeks do fine. But if somebody goes about a month of consistent work trying to find a job without any luck getting a job, they're actually highly likely to just give up altogether. And the statistics on the odds of people who get jobs are people who go past that point. Like they actually continue, regardless of like the psychological, like, psych out that can kind of, it's a like self-fulfilling prophecy sort of situation where people are like, well, I can never get a job. And at the point they say that, that's where they actually become the person who can never get a job, because they've psyched themselves out. And then even in interviews, they're not going to do well because they're psyched out and they're down, and they're not going to exude energy and positivity. They're going to exude like this negative, like, thing, and people sense that, like they can emotionally read it, and so that's where imposter syndrome rears its ugly head. And so you take that job interview feeling, and that's pretty much your feeling for the first few years of doing freelance. And then sometimes, 10 years in, you'll have that feeling come back because the clients dry up. So how do you override that voice that's just looking for a failure? That voice is looking for a failure. And then it's the second you have that rejection letter, or in Corey's case, right? Like when you were first submitting to these, film things, the first rejection, right? To override that voice that's like, yep, shouldn't have wasted your money, shouldn't have spent the thing. Like, you knew you were not going to get, you know what I mean? Like, you knew you were fake. And then the first win, you're going to psych yourself out too, because you'll be like, well, that's just a fluke. Like, it's a weird cycle. But if you can objectively step back, that helps during that query process. Because, like, once again, when I have experienced that in the past, I remember sending stuff to Scholastic for a couple of years, and then just objectively looking into it and thinking, how many submissions these people get a day, right? Yeah. Like, what's the likelihood that what I sent out even got through the slush pile? And then if it got through the slush pile and got in the hands of the art director, what are the odds that they had the time to even review it? And what are the odds that the reason for rejection was that I sucked? Like, it's actually much more likely they just don't need that style for what they're doing. Yeah. And so that's not to give yourself an excuse. Like, always get better, always be, getting continually better. But as an artist, just building that objective way of looking at things will allow you to give yourself a pass when it comes to, like, the beating yourself up kind of scenarios. Because weirdly enough, like, the world, the world doesn't think you're that special. And that's what it comes down to, is like the art director that is reviewing your art does not think you're that special. And so when they're like, if they're not choosing you, it's probably not because they, like, targeted you and were like, you suck. Like, it probably has a lot more to do with other circumstances. And so it's good to kind of keep objectivity. At least for me, that's been a real good balance for imposter syndrome, and also just having really good friends who know your mindset. Because, like, when I go down the imposter syndrome rabbit hole, my wife will be one of the first to kind of yeah, you're crazy, like like these great things have happened to you, and it's like, oh yeah, I forget that, so
yeah, that's a lot of really good stuff. For me, it's been really helpful to separate my work and the quality of my work and how I feel about the results and quality of my work with my own self-worth. I no longer attribute my value as a human being to the money that I make or to the work that I produce. And so, in essence, it's a bad road to go down if you make your self-evaluation of the value that you have as a human being be based on measurable things, because you have intrinsic value because you exist. Yeah. You're a person. That is 100% of the reason that you are a valuable individual. Anything beyond that is just a bonus. But if you tie your self-worth directly to the work that you produce, that's a dangerous road to go down, because everyone is going to strike out sometimes. Everyone is going to make a bad design. Everybody's going to draw a funky hand, no matter how well you know the bones of the hand and the arm. Like, everybody is going to have an off day. And the downside to that is, if I feel like I am worthy because my art is a specific quality, then what happens when my art is no longer that quality? Or what happens when I draw a bad panel or I have to erase something? Then you run into, now I am less worthy, right? And that's just not how it works. And so that's been one of the main things, is just I separate the value of what I do from the value of who I am. I'm valuable because I exist and because I've decided I'm valuable. In addition to that, I occasionally create valuable things, and I occasionally make mistakes in creating things. And those are two separate and distinct things. Another thing is that understanding that your brain does not always tell you the truth is really helpful. My daughter was talking to a counselor, and she was saying, like, oh, this is happening, and I think this or whatever. And the counselor said, well, you realize that your brain could be lying to you, right? And she was like, my brain can lie to me, and that is a thought. That is a thought that will be really helpful, is that you need to understand, see, statements like that, that's not useful. Just kidding. I appreciate that. But no, like, the idea is that if you understand that, like, the way that you think and the way that you feel, that's not an accurate representation of reality. That's just your interpretation from your limited vantage point, right? And so if you go out there and you've got this limited vantage point, and you've got hormones, and you've got limitations in what you see, and the input and the stimulus that you're receiving is being interpreted through your limited understanding of what's going on, then at any point in time, you can question a thought or a feeling and say, I don't know. I'm not sure that I'm reading that right. So I'm just not going to whatever. And here's the thing that scientists are finding is they've done a lot of studies in the last few years about this type of thing. And the idea is this: how you feel about your feelings is actually significantly more important in a mental health standpoint than the feelings themselves. And so that's useful, because I always call it the beautiful mind scenario, right? You got this guy who's got schizophrenia. He sees people that aren't there, and he tries to do medication. It doesn't work for him because it kind of, for him, it dampened his output or whatever. And I mean, it was years ago, so medication was pretty coarse at the time. But anyway, he stopped feeding him. He stopped feeding those thoughts. He said, I look at them like an appetite. It's always going to be there, but it gets stronger when I feed it, gets weaker when I don't feed it. So they were there at the end of that movie. They were there, but they were off in the distance. That's been the biggest thing that's helped me, is when I have an imposter syndrome thought, I've been using mindfulness. I don't judge it. I don't put value on it. I just identify it as what it is. That is an imposter syndrome thought. And then I move on. It is still there. It just has no effect, or little effect, And if I ever find myself in a spiral where I'm kicking myself or I'm beating myself up or whatever, I recognize you are in a spiral. And I see what is happening as if I was an outside observer, and then it continues to happen, but it no longer has any efficacy, and I can move on. And so being able to kind of tag and bag those thoughts is super helpful. And so if you never think about it, if you never know that this is a thing that most creatives deal with, self-doubt, self-criticism, imposter syndrome, whatever you want to call it, then when you have those thoughts, you think, oh, this must be true. 100% of what I perceive is my reality. So this must be true. But as soon as you start to realize, like, most creatives experience what we're talking about, then when you experience those things, you can be like, oh, this is that thing that they talked about. Tag it and back it. It's out. I don't need to think about it anymore.
Yeah, I love that idea. And that ties into, like, even like what I'm writing about in Quarterly Stories. It addresses like two kind of big mental illness issues. And one of the primary motivations for, like, even writing about that candidly is the idea that when people suffer from, like, mental illness, for whether it's situational or it's just like genetic or whatever it is, a lot of what can kind of worsen it is the idea of somebody thinking, well, I'm crazy, right? When they're going through something like that. And part of that has to do with like not really knowing what it is, not identifying it, like Corey was saying, and not really being able to identify kind of intrusive thoughts from like actual thoughts, or in this case, like imposter thoughts, like from real thoughts. Because the only imposter in imposter syndrome is the syndrome itself, right? But the thing that's tricky about it is it helps to learn about it, because when you learn about it, then you can notice it when it rears its ugly head. And what's fascinating is most self-doubt and kind of mental illness issues all have like a couple threads in common. They tend to try to get you alone. That's one thing. They want you isolated. They want you irrational, but they want you to think the irrational is rational.
Right.
And they're the best lawyers in the world who want a jury-free trial where you're the jury. And so it's like, the great thing is if you can like recognize it, if it's depression, if it's imposter syndrome, these are all things like most creatives suffer from. Yeah. It's a good thing to be able to identify it, because the second you identify like, hey, that's something I have, then it can, with mindfulness, like Corey's talking about, become like an old friend that you've kind of separated ways with because they were kind of toxic. But every once in a while they show up and you're like, I know you. I know that guy who just came in the room.
It's also can be kind of useful because I can use that inner critic to improve. And so like so for example, right, I did this animation, I threw it out into the world. The very first rejection that I got came with critique of why they rejected it. And I was able to agree with what they said. And also I was able to see why I wasn't a good fit for that thing. I didn't take that as the animation is bad, but I did take that as, I actually agree with the critique. I have reasons for doing it the way that I did it, and I can understand why you disagree with those, but I have my reasons for doing it that way. It's an interesting thing, but I can kind of use that. There's a huge difference between being something and having something, or being somebody who struggles with something.
Yeah.
If I am depressed, there's nothing I can do with that, because I am that thing.
Yeah.
If I occasionally struggle with depression, that's a fight I'm in. That's a fight I can win or lose. That's a fight that I can have an active participation in that. Yeah, I have agency. I have movement. But if I am X, then that's it. That's over. Yeah. You know, at the end of the day and at the beginning of the day, I've identified as that thing. So I'm not an imposter.
Yeah.
I am someone who occasionally has imposter syndrome thoughts.
Yeah.
And I know what to do with that. That's part of the active role that I play in my mind, which is different than I just accept the fact that I'm an imposter and there's nothing I can do about that. And I begin to self-identify with that. And I've seen people self-identify with their disability or self-identify with their struggle. You know, it's like, well, I'm just a screw up. That's just who I am. I just screw things up. And it's like, why are you giving that much power? Because there's nothing you can do from that standpoint. But if you're like, yeah, man, you know, sometimes I mess it up, you know, and it's like, well, yeah, sometimes we all do. But the fact of the matter is, identifying as something rather than somebody who deals with stuff, there's some real power and some real power loss depending on how you look at that.
Yeah. I agree. Perspective is huge on that.
Josh, if you said, when you were trying to quit smoking, if you said, I'm a smoker, well, then you can't quit, because who are you after that?
Exactly.
or I'm someone who smokes occasionally, or I'm somebody who's trying to quit smoking, that's a whole different thing, right?
Yeah,
Cigarettes become other than you rather than part of you.
So that's another reason to kind of reinforce the idea of don't get too married to your self-worth being tied to your work.
Yeah.
I always think of, oddly enough, this is going to get slightly dark, but it's a good example. I think of guys that, like if their self-worth were tied to their work, like, and that was successful, by all means, they would have been the happiest people on earth. And I quickly, very, very quickly, because I like storytelling, I think of Hemingway. And I'm like, oh, Hemingway was a badass. Like, I mean, he was like a bullfighter and just a cool dude and like one of the best writers. And he revered in his own lifetime. He wasn't one of those writers who like got super famous after dying. Like, he was a rock star and very wealthy, could travel the world, all of that. And then he blew his brains out with a shotgun. So, like it's and most of his writing, his journaling and stuff like that, and his public interviews talked about him defining his self-worth by what he could do, what he could write, what he could experience. And it's like, that's a bad, to me, there's a lot of examples of people who've lived lives tying their self-worth to their art and found themselves, like, even if your wildest dreams come true, like very discontented. And I think that's another reason to kind of realize like your value lies outside of that. And I also think of like, like we're all going to age out at some point, right? But as a kid, like, did I think my grandma wasn't valuable because she couldn't run, or, like the elderly weren't valuable because they couldn't draw or something, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of an absurd notion if you apply it to your own value of other people. Mm-hmm. And then also, like I said, you can also note that like people who find value based only on what you produce tend to treat other people really badly too, because then it's an exchange.
Yeah, human relationships are not transactional. Yeah.
And that can be really dangerous, right? Because there are times in friendships where people can't transact. And in families and in scenarios like that. So being able to find the value in people as individuals, including yourself, is like a really a good exercise. I mean, it's hard because I think commerce wants us to find value in what we can buy, right?
Well, commerce, especially in the rise of the tech industry, wants us to be commodities that are bought and sold. And we're actually like transacting with the industry and with the world at large through metrics that don't make a lot of sense. Like, think about how an artist feels about their Instagram, your relationship with your Instagram metrics. Yeah. That is a weird situation that we're in the past 5-6 years. Think of any other time in the history of the world where you put something up and you are given instantaneous results that seem like they're definitive. This got X number of likes and X number of shares and X number of saves. And it's not like Michelangelo's doing a painting and then people are able to like leave feedback that he can see, and that feedback somehow delivered to a magic piece of glass in his pocket, where he gets a notification every time somebody has an opinion on his work. We live in a weird time to be an artist. And the fact of the matter is that art is still, even though they've tried, not transactional. Now, there are things and value that you can bring to the table as an illustrator, as a designer, as a photographer, as a storyteller, that do involve transaction, that do involve money, that can be measured and there's worth. But there is something more important in the act of creation, in the fact that you made something that didn't exist before you came to the table, that can never be measured and it can never be quantified. And as much as social media and the tech companies want to boil it down to these vanity metrics, that you cannot play into that game. Because as soon as you start playing into that game, you start playing into the hands of those that would buy and sell you and mine you for your data and strip you of all your worth until you're a hollow husk, and they will move on and walk over your dead, empty corpse. They have no love for the individual. They have love for the manipulation of the masses, and it's important that we don't play their game.
Yeah, and also it's also important for art, because if you succeed, do you want to be the guy who was a great musician until the 50 record execs whispering in your ear to make a hip hop album, even though you're not talented at hip hop or whatever?
Yeah.
You decide, they're right, I'm brilliant, I'm God's gift to this earth, like I'm gonna make this terrible decision for my career. And you see it time and time again with people who get what relatively well known. It's like the fame or the recognition can get to you. I've seen it with social media influencers a lot, like where, they're like, I have, 10 million likes, so why should I care? And they start putting out crappy work. And sure, you're getting 10 million likes, but you're still putting out bad work, and by bad, I'm not meaning like in formal quality. I mean, we're just like super inauthentic to who that person is. So to me, it's like, I think if you're playing, like, sure, we all want more likes. We all want more money for our art, right? We all want more fame for our art. We all want more readers. We all want, these things, more viewers. But keep that hedge with the perspective of none of those things give what you're doing today any more value than what's there already, So like, to me, that's the thing. And I've seen that happen as well. I've seen artists who completely should have the most amazing followers on earth get them. And then I've seen artists who are a billion times more skilled than I am who can't get one like on Facebook or on Instagram. And I don't look at their work and go, oh, they only got one like.
Right.
I look at their work and go, God, that guy can use a pen like in a way I can't. I need to up my game,
Yeah.
So yeah, just rambling, but I think
I
important.
have a good story that I think could help wrap this. When I was a little kid, my mom drew and painted and stuff. And I remember at like 5 years old, I got really frustrated that she was way better than me. And I remember having this conversation with her and saying, Mom, like, you're just so much better than me. And she's like, honey, I've been doing this for like 5 times as long as you've been alive. Like, you've got to understand that I've got decades of it. And I couldn't see it. And it's funny because my daughter is now doing the same thing. Dad, like, you can just draw so much better than me. I'm like, well, honey, I'm 39 and you're 9. Like, that is way different. That is way different. You've got years ahead of you before you get to the, but she's just looking at the snapshot of today. If I just look at the snapshot of today and not the entire movie full of pictures, I made something and my dad made something better, and that means I'm bad. And if you can look at it that way and just recognize that those types of thoughts are very immature. And I don't mean that as an insult. I'm just saying, like, the maturity level that it takes to understand the journey of an artist is different than the maturity level of somebody who is a kid that compares themselves to somebody who's 30 years older than them.
Yeah.
And that's just it. So.
Yeah. And then, just follow the logical path, man, of comparison, because comparison only can get you so far, because the ladder never ends. Like, there's literally no success metric if all you're doing is comparing.
Yeah.
So you've quickly made a map with no ending. And once again, we're all kind of doing that as artists. We're all kind of on a journey of advancement that you never can stop trying to be better if you're a creative. But yeah, like that comparison game, man, I've seen that drag great artists into complete mud. Like, and I should say, like, a pit would be a better example that I haven't seen them get out of. Like, I've got some really close friends kind of just give up on art based on that, like the comparison thing. And because it can be so bad. And we all have a bit of it. But I think that's one of those things where, like, if you use some of these methods we've been talking about, you know, mindfulness, objectivity, you know, I think those things can kind of help you step outside yourself and not end up in that pit where you're just, you know, I think we've all met people like that. You meet people who are 90 and you can tell they've aged well and they've accepted kind of reality and are happy. And those guys don't tend to be the guy who's just like, could have been a rock star when I was 15, but then I ended up down this path and blah, blah, blah. And now I'm stuck here, blah, blah. Like those guys, the guys who go down that rabbit hole where it's just like, you can see all the negativity and the comparison has just created like, you know, a Sith Lord of an elderly person. And, you know, to me, it's like, I want to age and be like a pretty positive Jedi. That's where I want to get. Yeah. I don't want to be a Sith.
Scott, what are your thoughts?
Oh boy. As far as the comparing and despairing and the we talked about Instagram. I mean, you also have to realize that, you know, the stuff you're seeing on Instagram is usually everyone's best work. So, I mean, you see all your work, you see all the flaws, you see everything. Whereas the stuff, you got to realize the stuff people are putting out online for the most part is like their best work. So, you know, you're comparing possibly some of your worst work or just, you know, just your like sketches. Like, and when people post, a lot of times when people post sketches, and I'm kind of guilty of this too, when I post sketches on Instagram, you know, when I'm doing Inktober, I call it a sketch, but it's a little more than a sketch. I'm going to take a little more. It's, you know, I'm putting a little more into it to make it almost like a finished ink drawing, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, some of the terminology and some of the things like, oh, that's a sketch. And then you look at people, you know, sometimes, you know, you get the feeling like you're a hack when you look at some of these people's stuff and it's like, wow, I can't believe that, you know, and that's a sketch. And, you know, but because
it feels weird in our society to say, I worked really hard on this thing and I'm proud of it. So you want to downgrade a little bit. You're like, here's something I kind of threw together. You know, and like, you threw that together. You're like, no. In reality, I labored over this for 6.5 hours. You know, but like it feels weird to be like, I need you guys to validate my life.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a weird world out there.
Yeah.
Good world. But anyway, I say we call it. That was a good discussion.
Let's do it. That was good. All right. We let's let everybody know where to find our work. I guess you guys kind of know, but anyhow, you're on my channel, so you know where to find my work. And you can check out the comic that I've been working on the type pencils on today at quarterlystories.com. And then you can check out Corey's work. Where can you check out Corey's work?
Check out my stuff at coreycare.com. And I'm doing stuff on Instagram right now, and I'm talking to people about it on Twitter. So if you want to do that action, that's where that is. But coreycare.com will point you in whatever direction you want to go. I'm in a few different places.
I love it. And
Scott, how about you?
Scott, yes.
You can find me at circworks.com. I'm also Circworks on YouTube, where, as I mentioned earlier in the show, I just premiered my first episode to my new series, Making Comics 101, which will basically take you through the whole process of making comics. So it's kicked off and it's going to go for a while. So, you know, definitely check it out if you have any interest at all in comics, whether you're a newbie or seasoned professional. I think we'll get something out of it.
And if you want to get those episodes earlier than everybody else, what do you do there?
You can go to my Patreon. Any tier you get the videos early. So definitely check. Yeah, I'll probably, if I can remember tomorrow, I'll have to upload the one for Wednesday. So yeah.
I love
All
it.
right. Good talk,
All right.
guys.
Yes, we will see you guys next Wednesday or this Wednesday. All right, I'm going to go. Bye.